Welcome back to Miss April's English. Today we'll be talking about some common math terms in English. Let's get started. We're going to get started with operations. In other words, what do you do with the numbers to produce an output? When you see this sign that looks like a cross, we know that it means we're going to add. Listed here are more terms that mean the same as adding or increasing, such as ascending, earn, increase, more, save, total, which is adding all of your numbers together. When you see this sign that looks like a dash, it means we're going to subtract or take away numbers. The words listed here include subtract, decrease, descending, difference, minus, less, and spend. It always means that you're going to take away an amount from another number. Some other operations will include multiply or divide. The multiplication symbol can be shown as an X and sometimes as a dot. The division symbol looks like a bar with two dots, one on top and one on the bottom. Now, when you're dividing, you also may learn about fractions, where you have a part of a whole. The numerator is on the top and the denominator is the bottom number. So you have a part which is on the top and the whole piece which is on the bottom. You're taking a part of one whole piece. As the pie diagram shows, there is one white part, but in total there are 6 total parts. So a fraction of that is 1 out of those 6 parts. Now, more math vocabulary will include the word ratio, which shows the relationship between two numbers, or comparing quantities. For example, you may see numbers written with colons, such as 12 and 15 as shown here. You would say this as 12 to 15 or 12 out of 15. Sometimes you'll see a pie graph or a pie chart, or you'll see a fraction that shows a part out of a whole. Let's talk about signs of inequality. You would use signs of inequality when comparing two values using these symbols. You could use greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, or not equal to. You would use these symbols to show, for example, if 3 is greater than 2, you would insert the greater than symbol between the two numbers. Notice how when you have numbers that are greater than or equal to or less than or equal to, the symbol has a bar underneath the arrows. That's important. As you learn more math, you may see parentheses and groups, and these are the symbols for those. Or you may have to figure out the absolute value, which looks like 2 bars together. One thing to remember is the absolute value of a number is always positive because it is a distance. You would count the number of spaces from 0, perhaps on a number line, and then only take the absolute value of the number inside the absolute value bars. Exponents are denoted with this symbol that looks like a square root, or you may see that 10 squared with the number in the upper right corner. The exponent is that 2 in the upper right corner. And the word inverse. Sometimes math teachers will ask you to give the inverse of a number, which means give the opposite. Refer more to your math teacher for examples of problems like these. Now there's order of operations, which will give you the rules that you want to do first in an expression. So if you're learning about expressions, you're going to have to solve your problems in a certain way in order to get the right answer. Here in the USA, we use GEMDAS, or sometimes people will use PEMDAS as the acronym, but the G stands for groups, the numbers in parentheses or brackets, or even absolute value. And then you would solve the exponents in the problem, and the next order would be any multiplication or division, whichever comes first, and then you would solve any addition or subtraction in the problem, whichever comes first. This takes some practice, but once you get the hang of it, it's not so bad. Sometimes you may have problems that have squares or cube numbers. When a number is squared, it is multiplied by itself. For example, 3 times 3, or 3 squared is how we would say it, which equals 9. A number that is cubed would be multiplied 3 times. It would also have the exponent 3 denoted in the right corner. Have you ever heard of perfect squares? This is the number multiplied by itself, or the area of a square. For example, 2 times 2, or 2 squares, times 2 squares would give you 4 total, for 4 total is the area. There's also the square root of a number, which equals the side length of the perfect square. So when you look at this square, how many squares are there on the side? If the area, or the perfect square, ends up being 4, the square root would be 2. There's 2 squares on the side. If you're taking a beginning algebra class, you'll learn about the parts of an algebraic expression. We know our operations are addition, subtraction, multiplying, or division. But in the expression itself, you will have different parts. For example, in this expression, we have 3x plus 4y minus 9. The 3 and the 4 are a coefficient, those numbers in front of the letters. The letters themselves are variables. They could change. And the constants will stay the same. The constant in this expression is -9. We also have 3 terms here, or parts of this expression, which are 3x, 4y, and -9. Now it's time to talk about slope. When you're figuring out the slope of a line, you're going to be figuring out the steepness of that line. You'll also notice that in the equation for slope, m, the slope, equals the change in your y over the change in your x. Here in this example, the triangles denote a change. You will get your x and y values from the problems that you're given. If you need to know the equation of a line, you would write it in the form of y equals mx plus b. Again, m would show what the slope is, and y and the y-intercept would be the b value. You'll learn more about this as you take more algebra and math. 2 more words about slope include the constant, which is the number alone or by itself, and the coefficient, the number next to the variable or the letter. We discussed this in another slide, but here's another example. For the equation y equals mx plus b, m is the slope, b is the constant or the y-intercept. So when you have a problem to figure out, you'll need to substitute the numbers into the correct positions to figure out the problem. A few more things to remember about slope. If your line is positive or increasing, it will point up and to the right. If your line is negative or decreasing, it will point down and to the right. Sometimes your slope will stay the same. We call this a zero line. Sometimes your line may be undefined or not clear. Now in this situation, you would have a graph with points plotted on the graph, and perhaps the points don't make a straight line. This would show that it's undefined slope. You'll hear the words rise or run also when you're figuring out the slope of a line. Again, talk to your math teacher more about what these words will mean as you figure out the problem. Now let's look at taxes, tips, and discounts. This comes in handy when you're shopping or perhaps paying for a meal. The percent of tip will also increase the original total. So if you pay $5 and you also pay a tip, that will increase the amount you give to the server. We also use the words markup, tax, and tip in math. All of these terms mean there will be an increase in your total. Sometimes you may see a percentage off or a sale. This will result in a decrease in the original price or the amount, or also known as a savings. A discount will result in a decrease in the total amount of money that you will pay. A couple more vocabulary words include loans or loaning, which is the same as borrowing money, and interest, which includes money that is paid for borrowing money from the bank. For example, if you borrow money, the interest will be added to the amount that you owe the bank. A few more short words or phrases to remember when working in math are equation, simplify, perimeter, area, and like terms. You may also see words like graph, expression, solution, or solve. When dealing with money, remember that there are terms such as change, which means the money left over after paying for something. There's also a term called the flat rate. It's a fee or money that you only pay one time. You can refer to your change also as the amount remaining. So if your teacher says, "How much is remaining?" she really wants to know how much is left over. I hope this was helpful. What other terms do you need to know? Comment below. See you next time.